Hey y'all, I'm Hope. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm wrapping up all the books that I read in November, and this should be a pretty short video because I didn't read very much in November. This has been a month of mostly a lot of writing, a lot of researching, those kinds of things, so I haven't had a whole lot of reading time, and the stuff that I did read was either stuff I was reading for school or some spooky audiobooks that I listened to. So that's basically it. So the first thing that I read was The Bayou by Arden Powell, which was a class pick for my course that I was taking on Southern Gothic literature. And this one ended up being kind of disappointing to me because I've read some other stuff from Arden Powell, mostly kind of fantasy romance stuff. And I've always had fun with that, but I was curious to see what they would do with a Gothic horror. And I ended up feeling that a lot of the characters here were pretty flat, and it felt very superficially Southern, which is something that my class ended up talking about a lot when we were discussing the book, because basically nobody in my class really liked it all that much. But this book is following a guy named Eugene who, when he was younger, there was this girl in his town who went missing and was ultimately found in the bayou and believed to have been eaten by the gators, and now, like 20 years later, people are beginning to go missing in the town all over again. But at the same time, there's this odd outlaw figure who kind of walks into Eugene's life as well. So he's kind of dealing with all of that, and it all kind of comes together as you would expect. So I like the premise a lot, but again, I feel like this book just feels superficially Southern, like a bunch of stuff is tossed in as like the aesthetic of the South, but there's nothing in it that really connects it to the South in any genuine kind of way. And then also, I really didn't like the way that the ending played out. This is going to be a minor spoiler, but like, I don't really recommend this book, so it's fine. If you don't want to hear it, skip ahead a little bit. I will try to remember to put a thing on the screen, but I may not remember to do that. But anyway, basically, the whole thing is leading up to Eugene remembering that he witnessed his friend being raped by a priest. And that he then, because of various events and factors leading up to that, he convinced himself that he saw her being exorcised by the priest. And he tried to tell people that what he had seen, but he was telling them about exorcisms, and obviously they didn't believe him. So then the priest killed the little girl and threw her body into the bayou. And it's all about that, and like, the whole thing is her ghost getting its revenge. At the same time, the outlaw figure is some sort of fae creature from Ireland, I believe. He's supposed to be part of the Aishi, and yeah, I think he could have been really interesting, and in fact, I thought he was really interesting, but it just felt like there wasn't enough depth to either Eugene or the outlaw Johnny Walker for there to really be anything to dig into there. And I really didn't like the way that Mary Beth's rape at the hands of the priest was handled. So yeah, I just didn't think this was great, and it was one where I read it and I felt like, okay, well, that wasn't really what I was expecting, but I still enjoyed it all right. And then we talked about it as a class, and some of my classmates were able to kind of put together in words the things that had been bothering me about the book, and I ultimately realized I was really disappointed in it. So anyway, this was kind of sad for me. I think going forward, if I read anything else from Arden Powell, I'm going to stick to their fantasy romance stuff, because at least that's like fun and fluffy, and I'm not looking for there to be any more depth than just like a fun, fluffy romance story. But I think that this one was just not handled well. After that, though, the other two things that I read in November were both audiobooks, and they were both books in the same middle grade horror series, which I started in October. So I read Dead Voices and Dark Waters by Catherine Arden. I actually just finished Dark Waters today, and I really enjoyed both of these. So this was nice. It was a nice little way to end the month with two audiobooks I actually did really like. But these are very fun. This is the second and third book in her Small Spaces series, which follows Ollie and her friends Coco and Brian. In the first book, they meet and face off against an entity called the Smiling Man. And then each subsequent entry is them having to face off against him again, but each one is a different season. So the first book is set in fall, the second one is winter, the third one is spring, and now the one that just came out this year, which I have not gotten a chance to read yet, is summer. So Dead Voices, I think of the two, is my favorite. It was the second one, so we're going to talk about it first. But there's a wind chime in my mom's room, and my cat likes to go in there and ring it. So I don't know if you heard that in the background, but he just did that. Anyway, Dead Voices is the winter installment in the series, and this one follows Ollie, Coco, and Brian a few months after the events of the first book, when Ollie's father wins a trip to a reopening ski lodge for 5 people before the actual lodge is set to open. So it's like a promotional thing. There's a few people that have won trips, and they go, but there's this horrific snowstorm, and they end up snowed into the lodge with the 2 owners, and they end up having to try and escape the Smiling Man again overnight while they're trapped in the snowy lodge. I really liked this book as a follow-up to the first book because I think it deals with a lot of the fallout of the first book in a really interesting way. You have Ollie and Coco and Brian all having to now deal with these new sets of fears that they have as a result of what happened to them in the first book. Like, they're all quite anxious and kind of paranoid, and it's clear that they've been traumatized by what's happened to them, but it's dealt with in a really delicate way, and we're shown the ways that the 3 characters are kind of dealing with what's happened to them, but they're also like banding together. They formed a really close friendship that's really cute. So I really enjoyed all of that, and I liked that there was some incorporation of new characters, because like Ollie's father is in this book more, Coco's mother shows up, and then the 2 lodge owners as well. And I really liked the way that they kind of got incorporated, and they weren't obviously like main players in the story because, you know, the Smiling Man is mostly targeting these 3 kids, but I liked the incorporation of them into it. I thought they were really fun characters, and I thought they added something really charming to the story. And then the other thing I really liked in this was that Coco really gets to shine in this one. So Ollie is kind of the hero of the first book, and Coco got to be the hero here. And I really liked that for Coco because she's this kind of small, timid girl who's constantly kind of anxious and scared anyway. And this was her chance to prove what she's capable of because she's really intelligent. She's really good at chess. She's constantly like putting things together. She's observant. She's just really good at puzzling things out. So I really liked that Coco got a chance to shine in this book. I do wish we'd gotten some more of Brian because he kind of like disappears for most of the book, but I'll come back to that because it's relevant to the 3rd book. But yeah, I just like the way that this one played out. And also, this was just a random detail that like completely confused me. I still don't understand why it's there, but there is a bit in the story where Coco is talking about chess with the Smiling Man. And I'm not going to go any further than that. I don't want to give you any kind of spoilers. But there is a bit where the Smiling Man makes a reference to the 7th seal, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a movie that I'm only vaguely familiar with. I haven't actually seen it. But it's like a 1950s black and white movie about, like, philosophy and death. It's a movie where this knight is returning home, I believe, to like Sweden after the Crusades, and when he gets back, his country is being ravaged by the plague, and as he's walking along the beach and trying to get home, he's approached by the Grim Reaper, not the Reacher, the Reaper, who tells him that his time has come, and the knight decides to play a game of chess against the Grim Reaper to try and save his life, basically with his life being the thing that they're kind of betting on. And the whole movie is like about that, but it's also like this philosophical exploration, and I don't know anything else beyond that, but there is a bit where the Smiling Man remarks that the last time he'd played chess was with a soldier on the beach, and he hadn't had this much fun since it was plague in Europe. And I immediately was like, that's a 7th seal reference, but why the hell is that in a middle grade horror book for kids? I genuinely don't understand why it's there, but it is, and I want you to know that. So then the 3rd book, Dark Waters, I just listened to today, and also very fun. I didn't like this one quite as much as Dead Voices because there were a few things that I thought were a little shakier here, but we again get more incorporation of new characters who I thought added something to the story. The main friend group gets the addition of Phil, who is a character who shows up briefly in the first book, but now he's back and he's actually like a part of their little group, and so I thought that that was fun, that it kind of changed the dynamics of the group a little bit. Brian being very absent in the previous book was important here because he's kind of the hero of this 3rd book, and there's a lot of the book that's discussing the ways that he felt like he had failed his friends in the 2nd book, and how this was like his chance to, you know, use his skills and make it up to them. So I thought that that was really interesting, and I thought also that, again, this book continues to deal with some of the fallout from the 1st book, but also begins to incorporate, like, they've had this 2nd traumatic event, and so now they have these new things that they're having to deal with and the ways that they're dealing with them. Part of that I didn't totally get because Very early in the book, there's a bit where Brian's parents are like, hey, we don't think those girls are good for you because your grades have started dropping. And it's weird to me that his parents thought that it was his new friends who were the problem and not the fact that he had been through an incredibly traumatic event the previous fall. They don't know about the events in the ski lodge, but they do know about his having been missing for 2 days in the first book. And so it was weird to me that, like, knowing that they assumed that the problem with his grades was his new friends and not the fact that he had been, like, severely traumatized by pretty horrific events. And just the fact that, like, they don't know everything that happened to him. But, like, it's gotta be scary for a kid to suddenly, like, be missing for 2 days and not know if they're gonna come home. Like, the parents had to have been scared too. So I just thought that that was a little bit of a strange detail for them to put that emphasis on his friendship with the two girls. But other than that, I thought it was interesting the way that some of the horrors that they had experienced in the second book then started to bleed into the third book. The other thing I didn't love in this one is that I feel like there was less in this one than the first two of the kids, like, puzzling things out. What we were getting more of was kind of pieces of a puzzle being presented, and, you know, it's written for a middle grade audience, so a lot of the things you can kind of pick up. You go, oh, okay, this is what's going to happen. But in the first two books, you really get, like, the kids figuring it out. And in this one, it felt more like there was a lot of a character you weren't getting the perspective of, particularly Ollie, who we do not get her POV in this third book, but also Mrs. Zentner, Coco's mother. They kept, like, providing answers. Like, there'd be some mystery and we wouldn't have any evidence of the kids puzzling it out until suddenly Ollie is like, oh, it's this. And so I felt like that was an element I really liked in the first two books that was lacking here. On the other hand, I think that some of the horror elements in this one were really well done. In fact, I liked them a little bit better than some of the earlier horror elements in the first two books. I think in terms of the horror, my favorite is like 3, 2, 1. But I really liked, like, the scary pieces here, because there were a couple of different things that were kind of getting woven together, and this was a part of, like, the kids having stuff to puzzle out, was precisely, like, who these different people are and what these other things are. I'm trying to be vague, so I'm not giving spoilers for this in case you want to read it, because I do think it's very fun. But yeah, I thought that this was very spooky, and I was impressed with how far Catherine Arden was willing to go in terms of the horror elements for a younger audience. I think this was a really interesting horror book for children. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I just didn't like it quite as much as the second book, but I still liked it a lot. I still think it's a very fun book. It would be really great for any kids that are interested in horror. And I'm hopefully going to be able to read the fourth book soon. My library doesn't have it yet. I think it came out in August. But yeah, my library doesn't have it yet, and I don't want to buy, like, just the fourth book in the series. So I'm going to wait and see if Libby gets it, and if not, I will probably try and get it off Audible or something, because I really have enjoyed having these as audiobooks. I think the audiobooks are really well done. I'm trying to remember the name of the narrator. I think it's Renee Dorian. I will put her name somewhere on the screen, because she's fantastic. She does a really great job narrating all of these. It really captures my attention, and I often struggle with audiobooks, but I've had no problem focusing on these ones, and I really have liked having them as something to listen to while I'm working, because I do a lot of very tedious things for my graduate assistantship. Lots of uploading documents and things like that. So it's been really nice to have those as just, like, something fun to listen to while I'm working. But yeah, that's everything I read in November. This may be a little bit longer than I thought because I rambled a little bit there. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite book you read in November was down in the comments. And if you like this video, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Tuesday and Saturday, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.